Welcome to the Millionaire University podcast. I'm your host, Brien Gearin, with you today. And on this edition of the MU Pod, I'm joined by Owen. He's the founder of Business Builders, a marketing agency that does what it says. It's marketing that works and it helps build businesses. He's also a father of 5. Congratulations, man, as a father of 4. I can relate. It's quite the trip. And Jay is also the host of the podcast, Building a Business That Lasts. And he has a book by the same title. So Jay, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, this is going to be awesome. So admittedly, we hadn't met till before this podcast, and I didn't realize we're in the same ballpark here with marketing, owning a marketing company and helping small businesses grow through that medium. And we're going to nerd out today. I can't wait because we have a lot to talk about when it comes to marketing, how to start and scale a marketing company, what you guys do, how you do it, who you help, and all the multitude of ways that you do it. So before we hop into that, let's hear your origin story. How did you start this company? How did you get to where you are today?
Well, I think a lot of people wonder, is entrepreneurship nature or nurture? And I think it's both. A little bit of both. I had an uncle who ran an insurance company. I had a grandfather who ran a restaurant chain. And when you see other people doing a thing, you think, oh, maybe I could do something like that. But from a very young age, I've always wanted to kind of start my own thing. I've kind of had it in my blood, if you will. Started a little red wagon concession stand at about 8 or 9 years old. Ran a lawn business like most boys between 12 and 15 down here in Florida. I got an internship when I was 16 at a company in Jacksonville, Florida, to help build websites. I'd built websites since I was probably 11 or 12, which is about when the internet came out, to date me. And then I just thought to myself, I think I could do this myself. I think I could run my own web design company, and started that actually with a buddy in high school when I was 17. And that was 26 years ago. And then year over year, I've just grown little by little. My kind of MO is to just think, how do I be a little bit better than me from last year? I'm not too concerned about what competitors are doing. I think a lot of small businesses get too concerned about what their competitors are doing. And what they should do is be worried about what they're doing and control what you can control, which is, look, just do a little better than you did last year, and it'll keep growing. And so we've grown from $5,500 that first year when I was 17 to a multimillion-dollar agency today that runs mostly without me. I probably only spend about 20 hours a week on the business now. And but I still love it. I love this team. I love this place I get to work with, and I love the businesses we get to help grow.
That's awesome. I love that, having, kind of being near a much earlier version of your journey. So this is, it really piques my interest, but starting this back in high school. So I also had a lawn care business back in high school. That was my jam. I didn't find marketing till 10 years later, but I'd love to hear how you said you were building websites when the internet first came out, when you were about 11 or 12 years old, and then starting this company at 17. What was it like? Were you technically minded, or were you just like, hey, that looks really cool, I want to get into doing that? Or was it just something that piqued your interest? And how did that work?
Yeah, I was just like a super nerd, like I was into computer stuff in general. I thought it was interesting. It's just kind of like my nature. It's a gift, I guess, that God gave me from a young age. And I remember I was probably 11 or 12, and I was dialed into some bulletin board service. This is really dates me for people that are not over 40, but back in the day before there was the internet, you had to dial into these phone numbers and you could connect to these bulletin board systems. And it was kind of like almost like a Reddit from back in the day, which an 11, 12-year-old probably shouldn't be on, but I was. And it was all like tech nerd stuff. And I remember reading this article about, it said, coming soon, the World Wide Web. And I thought, oh, wow, this could change everything. And people are like, did you really think that when you were 11 or 12? I'm like, yeah, I did, because I've been 40 since I was, 11. Now I actually am over 40. But, back then I just saw that and I thought, this changes everything. In fact, I tell this story a lot. I think there's been 3 times in my life where I thought to myself, this changes everything about everything. The first was that time I was 11 or 12 and I read that article about the World Wide Web. Certainly it has changed everything. Some for good, some for bad. The second time was when Steve Jobs came on stage and said, hey, we've got 3 new products today, a radical internet communicator, a touchscreen iPod, and a revolutionary phone. And he said it 3 times. Then he said, no, it's not just 3 products, it's 1 product, and we're calling it the iPhone. And I remember thinking, wow, this changes everything. Some for good, some for bad. I mean, there's been some great gifts from having these touch screen phones, and also some great curses. And then the 3rd time was probably 2.5 years ago, however long it's been now, when I first tried ChatGPT and started to delve into this AI world and thought, oh, this is the most consequential thing, maybe the most consequential invention in the existence of humanity. Like, as crazy as that sounds, I actually think that's true. And we'll see that play out over the next 20 years. I think it's bigger than the Industrial Revolution. So, that's kind of how I ended up in these things. I'm just into technology. I'm a tech early adopter. I'm the guy who would wait in line for 6 hours for the first iPhone. Thankfully now we can just order them. They'll show up at our doors much better. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it all.
Okay, so at age 17, you start your legit business. You're developing websites. Was it a slow burn for the next few years? Did you go to college? Did it get put off? Like, what was the development like?
Yeah, so I went to college briefly. I went to UCF in Orlando for a year, and then quit and came home. I had to decide whether I wanted to keep running the business or stay in school. And also, there was a girl that I really liked back here at home, who's now my wife of 22 years. So that worked out.
Congratulations. Yep.
And school wasn't for me. I was pretty good at school, like other than maybe spelling and grammar, because I'm a little dyslexic. But everything else, I was pretty good at it. I got good scholarships. They actually were paying for me to go to school. But just sitting in class, I just felt like this is a waste of my time. Like, I should be doing something that's actually creating value instead of just sitting here listening. And maybe that was naive. I don't know. But it all worked out in the end. And so I... in the early years, I wasn't sure if it was going to work though. Like, honestly, I mean, I made $1,500 when I was 17, probably 15 grand the next year, probably 20 the next, probably 25 the next. So it was a slow climb. I was the tortoise and the hare story, And there was a time I just got married where I thought, I don't know if I can make this work. My wife and I were both waiting tables. I was running the business, but it was maybe making 25, 30 grand a year. And I thought, and that's revenue, not profit. Although most was profit, because it was mostly my time back then. And I thought, we want to have a family and we want to have kids, and maybe I need a different plan. And my uncle, who I mentioned earlier, he's in the insurance business. He needed an exit plan. He was probably, 50 at the time. He needed an exit plan. I needed an entry plan. And so I thought, well, this is perfect. I'll go learn from him. He'll fade out over the next 10 to 20 years. I'll fade in over the next 20 years, and I'll become the new Owen and Associates. That was kind of the vision. So I went to work with him for about 6 months, and turns out I hated insurance. And I'm a creative person, and if you get too creative in insurance, you go to jail. Thankfully, I didn't go to jail, for the record, but I knew I'd married the right woman one day when I came home, and I sat with my wife and started crying, because I'm a crier, and I said, I think I could do this, and I think I can make a lot of money, but I don't think I'll ever love it, and I don't think it's what I'm made for. And she said, so quit and do what you love. And I wasn't making any money at the business at the time for her to say that. And the opportunity in the insurance side was much higher, and at least it seemingly. So I went back the next day, sat down with my uncle, who I love. I learned more in that 6 months of business with him than I could have ever learned in school, because I sat on calls with him. I went to meetings with him. I saw how he dealt with complicated clients. It's the best education. I wish we did a better job in America with internships, apprenticeships, all that kind of stuff. Most kids would do better not paying anything for school and just saying, hey, can I come work here for 2 years for free and just shadow you? Most people would do much better with that. And so I sat with my uncle and cried, because I'm a crier, and I quit. And I said, hey, I love you, and I love that you've given me this opportunity, but this is not what I was made for. And that was the day that I said, I'm either going to turn this thing into a multimillion-dollar success, or I'm going to, burn it out and know for sure that this is not what I'm supposed to do. And, for the last, 5, 6, 7 years, we've done millions of dollars a year in revenue, and it's going really good. And by the grace of God, so I'm really thankful that my wife was bold enough to trust me to follow the call of my heart at the time.
So how old were you when you kind of reached that crossroads?
We got married. I was probably 21.
Wow.
So,
okay.
I was pretty
So still
young.
relatively speaking, still pretty young and still pretty early to in terms of time to make that decision, make a huge pivotal decision in your life, first of all, and then to decide to dive headfirst into your venture. So it sounds like at that time you feel like, you know what, I've been doing this kind of on the side for a while, but I love it. I really enjoy it. And that's when you decided to pour into it. So let's talk about when you made that decision, you picked it up. What were your first steps? What, like, were you like, okay, I definitely have something here. There's smoke. There's got to be a fire. How do I turn this into what I really want it to be?
Well, there's a couple of things I learned from my uncle that were pivotal. One was, if you want to grow a business over time, just do a great job for people and ask them to tell somebody else, and you'll never run out of business. And that's huge. It seems so simple and so obvious. And for those of us that are in the marketing space, we go, well, why do they need marketing? And sometimes people will say that to me. And I go, well, because when somebody does refer somebody else to you, what's the first thing that person's going to do? They're going to go Google you. And the first thing they're probably going to see is your Google My Business profile. And the second thing they're probably going to do is click on your website and go look at your website. And so the question is, do those things make them more likely to buy from you or less? There is no neutral. People are like, oh, it's okay. I'm like, no, it's not. It's either a little bit more likely, a lot more likely, or a little less likely, or a lot less likely that they're going to buy from you after they see and experience those things. And so all the work we do on the marketing side just amplifies that referral network. Your business should be built on referrals because you're doing a great job for people. The other thing that he told me, which made a huge difference for me, was he looked at my business at the time and he said, it seems like all of your business is project-based. So in other words, I'd do a project for $500 and that was it. And I'd do a project for $1,000 and that was it. And he's like, you got to find a way to create some recurring revenue so that every month, every year, you're not starting from zero. And so now, to date in the agency, we have, I want to say about 70% of our revenue right now is recurring. So it's millions of dollars a year that on January 1, I'm not starting at zero. I'm starting at like millions of dollars that's already lined up and booked for that year. And we want to stack on top of it for sure, but it's a lot easier to stack on top of something that already exists. And so just those two things alone were huge, like mind shifts for me of what needed to be true in order to actually scale this thing over time.
Great points. Great points. When was it that, I guess, how long did it take you to get to the point where you felt like, oh, there's actually some hockey stick growth here, where I imagine it started out a little bit slow. And yeah, I love your point about referrals. Like, that's the holy grail of business if you have great referrals, because that means you do a great job. People like working with you and they're willing to tell their friends and family about it. But for you, how old were you, or what point in time, or how old after you made this decision to go headlong into this, was it where you started noticing life-changing growth in your business?
It was pretty fast-ish by my standards. In other words, like, a couple of years. That's fast when you've been running a business for 26 years. Because I went from whatever it was that year, about $25,000, and it doubled the next year to 50, doubled the next year to 100. And so it's a lot harder to double it these days every year. But back then, I think as soon as I hit that like 6-figure mark, which isn't maybe as much money now as it used to be back then, but back then there was something about hitting that $100,000 mark as a pretty young person, as a 20-something-year-old, that felt like, okay, this thing's going to work. Like, I can make enough money for this to work. And then I started to hit the point where you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you can do it all on your own, because we've all been told these lies that if you want something done right, you've got to do it yourself. And that's just completely hogwash. What you actually need to do is build a good team of people, contractors, employees, partners, affiliates, networks, who can help you help the people that you're helping. That's how you create multiplicative growth. And so I had to learn the hard way between that, 6-figure and 7-figure, from 100,000 to $1 million. Everybody thinks, well, once they hit 6 figures, it's like, well, now I want to hit 7. Like, this is just like how the world is, But the interesting thing was, I was probably doing personally better when the company was at like 250-ish than I was when the company was at $1 million. Because at $1 million, and say 10 employees or so, you can't just wing it anymore. Like you can wing it to about $1 million if you're smart enough and fast enough on your feet and hard enough working. But after that, you really have to have better systems. You really have to have better processes. It can't just rely on you anymore. And so that's a different shift. And I had to learn, a lot of people who run small businesses do not run businesses. They run really bad jobs. And what I mean by that is if they left, it would not exist anymore. And so the only way to know if you really run a business is if you leave, do you own the business or do you run it? And sometimes it's both. But if you leave and the thing doesn't work anymore, it's not a business, it's a bad job. And so I had to ask those questions of how do I turn this thing into a business? How do I make it work without me? And we've done that. I mean, I've gone from, back in the day, there were plenty of weeks where I spent 80 plus hours, like just hammering away as soon as I could open my eyes till the time I closed my eyes, no question. And now I probably only spend about 20 hours a week on the agency.
Wow. Okay. So let's talk, let's keep rolling down that road. How did you come about your first hire? What department was it in? Like at this point, were you just web dev or when did you expand into other marketing avenues and then make your first hire?
It was web marketing and not marketing, web hosting and maintenance originally. Those were kind of the three categories. Hosting and maintenance became like the recurring revenue piece, It's funny, actually, I remember selling my first hosting account and I think I was paying $4 a month for the hosting. I think I charged the client 10. And so I was making $6 a month. So that's $10 a month times 12 months. That's $120 a year in recurring revenue.
Blowing it out, baby.
And it's so easy to look at that and go, well, that's nothing. And it's like, yeah, but my hosting side of the business now is a 6-figure business all by itself. Like I could just pull hosting out of the company right now and it would be a multi-6-figure business that runs really well and it's very profitable. But it started at $120 a year, And I actually used contractors for a very long time. So for probably 10 years from 1999 when I started until about 2008-ish, so maybe 9 years, I used a lot of contractors because I was pretty good at being in meetings. And I think this is an entrepreneurial trait that has great value. I'm confident enough to believe that I can figure out how to do whatever the thing is, even if I don't know how to do it, or that I can find who can help me do that. There's a great book by Dan Sullivan called Who Not How. And it's that mindset, which it's a newer book, but I had that mindset early on of how do I contract this out so I'm not committed to having an employee. It wasn't until probably 2008-ish, because it was when the market was starting to collapse and the economy was really struggling, that I looked around and I thought, wow, a lot of people are losing their jobs. The economy seems to be struggling. I'm doing pretty good. In fact, my company did really well through that season because a lot of companies who had been paying really high-end marketing agencies couldn't afford them anymore. And now they needed to hire this small little design extensions company, which was the name of my company at the time, over here because I was way cheaper, but I was still profitable. And so I was able to scale in that season when everybody else, or the country at least, was struggling a bit. And that was when I hired my first employee because I think I could give somebody a job that they'd like to do. I think I could give somebody a job that I would like to do. Like if I had to work for somebody, what would I want that to look like? And so that's how I have always hired, or how I've tried to build a team is, what would I want it to be like? And so that was kind of that genesis in that first 10 years. I did most of it myself, which means I worked way too many hours. I contracted out a lot. And eventually I thought, I think I could make a full-time job for somebody else. And I did some really bad hiring in the first couple of years because I had no idea what I was doing.
I think that's a very common story. I've done that myself. It's a common pitfall, but it's one of those where it's life, man. It's experience. You learn as you go. We're always learning on the job, which I like how you mentioned that it would be great if all American kids would just be put into an apprenticeship for 2 years. Just learn on the job. Pick any job you want. Go expose yourself to it and understand it. Not to go on a diatribe there, but when you were building this business, so you're starting to get some steam, you worked with contractors for a long time, you started adding a few services here and there. How did you, at this point, what were you doing to bring in new business? And I guess at what clip was new business coming in?
In the early years, it was mostly word of mouth, mostly referral. That transitioned at some point. I don't know specifically when, but when I started getting more comfortable it probably was more like 10 years in. And my main lead source became me talking on stages. I found out that I kind of liked that, which is interesting because if you had seen me as like a 7th or 8th grader, you'd have been like, this kid is never going to stand in front of people and say words. Like, and for many people, you know, just public speaking is one of their greatest fears. They say it's like the second only fear to death or something like that.
Isn't that crazy?
And now I love it. Like I love being on stages. People think that I'm an extrovert, but I'm actually like by nature, I think I was born more of an introvert, and I've learned to become more of an extrovert over time because of the benefits that it provides in certain environments. And so then it became me speaking on stages that was a primary lead generator. And obviously all the other stuff too, you know, that we did for our clients, like search engine optimization and, you know, social media. And, you know, we didn't really do a whole lot of paid ads. Interestingly, for marketing agencies, I think that sometimes the things that work really well for our clients based on the industry that they're in don't necessarily work really well for us, which is a very ironic thing. And I've always kind of struggled with that, but it's true because the things that I could do for an HVAC company or a roofing company are going to work really well for them. And I know that they will, but they're probably not going to work the same for us just because the product set's so different. We're not selling widgets. I don't want to sell to everybody. I want to sell to a specific group.
Exactly. So when you were speaking of specific groups, when you were building these websites, you're growing the business, you're 10 some years in now. I know you mentioned that you're kind of niche agnostic, if you will. So you work with all sorts of small businesses. And I believe you told me before we recorded, you work typically with businesses that are in the $2 million to $20 million range. Were you ever tempted to niche down to a specific area, or was it just the money kept coming in, people of all stripes and businesses were coming for help and you just never felt the need? Did you ever have a crossroads like that?
I mean, I feel like I've had 100 people over time in agency space tell me that I have to niche down. And I don't like when people tell me that I have to do things. And so I like to do things differently, you know?
Preaching to the choir.
Which is why like the Apple Think Different campaign like was so powerful for so many creatives, because we feel that way. You know, I'm moderately dyslexic, I'm pretty ADHD, like all those things tend to make my brain work a little differently. And so what I would say about niching specifically inside of agencies is it is a fast path to growth. It is an easier way to systematize. There are many benefits to it. I just like the broader portfolio. And there's a couple of reasons that I like it. One, it's interesting. It's not easier, but it is interesting. Two, it does create some bit of a safety net. I'll give you a specific example. I live here in Florida, and I have many friends who run other agencies, and I know one guy who focused specifically on tourism in Florida. That was his niche. And when COVID came around, guess what happened to all the tourism everywhere?
Oops.
It stopped. Yep. And so what happened to those budgets? They stopped. And so he went from whatever, you know, millions of dollars a year to like basically nothing almost overnight. I mean, even with contracts and stuff, people, when times get really bad, the contracts are only good as the people that sign them. And so, but because of our broad portfolio, we didn't struggle like that. Same thing in 2008. I know people in 2008 who were specific to real estate, and all they did was marketing for real estate companies. Well, how did that work out? Not good. And so I like the diversity in the same way that I think about a stock portfolio. So the way I think about my business is I want a diversified service set, because some of those services are going to do well in any given year and some are not. So we do everything from consulting, messaging, and strategy to websites, videos, hosting, maintenance, and marketing partnerships. And all of those could be their own individual businesses, but they create a diversity in service set. And then I have a diversity in client set. Now, make no mistake, it does add complexity and it slows growth. And so, but I think the mistake that people make is they just want to grow really fast. That's what every podcast, every like thing about entrepreneurs, how to grow fast, how to make $1 million in the next 3 months or whatever. And I'm like, most things that go really fast, like here's what we know to be true. All businesses at some point are going to go through a significant dip or valley. It's just the reality of business. When that happens, if you're moving too fast, it's like a car moving too fast. If a car moves too fast and it runs into a tree, it doesn't go very well. If a car's moving kind of slow and it bumps into a curb, not that big of a deal. A little scratch, we'll buff it off or just leave it and keep moving, you know? And so
buff right out.
that's how business is. And so I've always been a fan of like, let's just grow this thing slowly and see what happens. Now, I also had the luxury of that because I started very young and I realized everybody doesn't have that same luxury. That said, you don't always have to make full-blown moves. So let's say somebody's working a full-blown career right now, but they want to start this side hustle, they want to start this side business. They don't have to quit that career to go run the side hustle. They may just have to get a few less hours of sleep. I don't know. It's not necessarily good advice long-term because sleep, we all know we need good sleep, but sometimes you got to find an extra 2 hours somewhere. Maybe you cut all your Netflix out. Maybe you cut out your dumb scrolling on social media, you know, me too. Like whatever those things are that are actually eating up your time and build that business on the side and let it get to a point where then you can replace the primary income.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's not to go on a tangent about time, but we all have more time. It's a matter of where we're willing to make the cuts to create it or to have it, to buy it back essentially, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's fantastic advice. And having been someone who grew their agency on the side, I had that epiphany. You know, I was like, this is going to be my future. I have to act like it. And I had a moment where I was like, I'm kind of slacking on this thing. And what's up here? And it was just a, you know, come to Jesus moment where it's like, all right, if you're going to do this, go do it. You know, burn the boats, full stop. So I love that. What's, you know, I'm really curious as you started growing, and I love the point you made about, you know, kind of antithesis of niching down. I have to agree with you as someone who hasn't necessarily niched down. We have a niche that we, you know, we kind of promote towards.
Yeah.
But I love working with businesses of all stripes because I get to learn so much about other industries that I would have otherwise known nothing about. And I get to meet and work with and service awesome business owners who they all want the same thing. Everybody wants to own their business, call the shots, and live a life of true freedom, right? Whether it's financial, time, both, everything, right? And being able to help them take the small steps, especially when they're younger or starting out, is such a rewarding thing. And if you're niching down immediately, like I tried to niche down immediately out of the gate back like 8 years ago.
That's exactly what everybody says you have to do.
Because everyone told me, right? That's just, I was told I have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized like, look at all this business out here. Why should I focus on real estate agents who they suck with marketing anyway? Like why would I focus on that? And the minute I opened my eyes up to that and just started knocking on doors in my local area, like it just completely changed everything. So I'm glad you made that point. And I think that's the best way I've heard it explained before because you don't hear that very often. So thanks for sharing that part of it. So as you started growing this thing, you're becoming a legit business, maybe at the point in time where you went from contractors to employees. What were the services that you were offering besides web dev? Like what specific marketing services were you offering? And did they all build upon each other or did you kind of be like, we need to offer all of these things?
Yeah, we didn't do a lot of marketing back then. Actually, we did more development work than we did marketing. We did some SEO. So SEO was really the only, like search engine optimization was the primary marketing vehicle that we used. So it started with websites. I added hosting. I added maintenance. I added some development work, which is really like more complex web development, web design, really. It's databases and, you know, systems and all that kind of stuff. I contracted all that out because I didn't know how to write code. And then we started doing marketing because we started to get into bigger businesses and you start to get to a point where, okay, well, great, you've got an awesome website, but it's kind of like having an awesome business in the middle of the woods. And if nobody can find it, then what's the point? And the converse of that is true as well. It's like if you have an incredible piece of real estate in the middle of downtown with tons of foot traffic, but when people walk in, they're like, ugh, this is not, I don't even know what these people are doing. That's the opposite problem. I got a bad website, but great traffic, but you could also have a great website and no traffic. So we tried to solve that problem early on. So we started with search engine optimization, eventually added paid ads, PPC, eventually added social media. And just, you know, you just start adding reputation management through things like helping manage reviews and Google My Business profiles and all those other pieces of the puzzle. And so really just depending on what the client needs were, we tried to adjust. But we're also not trying to do everything for everybody because there are some things that, you know, we've just found are maybe not a great fit for us. And we've got great partners and relationships that will outsource those to, or just hand them off and refer them to other people.
What are some examples of those services that you choose not to provide?
We don't do a lot of influencer marketing right now. We dabbled in it for a little while, but I think it's a pretty good niche for somebody to focus on. And so we'll outsource things like that. That's probably a pretty good example.
Okay, gotcha. So what are the, I guess for your average client, are you guys like on packages, or is it you meet the client where they are? If they just need web and maintenance,
Yeah.
you're happy there? Or do you have kind of an average clientele that has a certain package and what is in that package, if you will?
Yeah, so probably 7 or 8 years ago, I read a book called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. And it really changed my mindset around the importance of messaging and the words that we use. So we always say design builds trust, but words are what sell. And so one of the biggest mistakes that I see people making is that their messaging up front is not clear enough. The audience that they're trying to approach is not defined enough. And as a result of that, anything else that they do, website, video, search engine optimization, paid ads, Google My Business, whatever, all those other things, they're not necessarily no value, but they're much less value than they would be if they got the messaging right up front. So one of the things we changed that changed everything was now we won't do anything with a client until we do what we call a marketing blueprint up front. And I always say you wouldn't build a house without a blueprint. You shouldn't run a marketing campaign without one either. So we'll spend somewhere between 2 and 6 hours with the client and kind of their key leadership team. I lead a few of those, not that many anymore. Chris, who is the president of the company now, he's been with me for 15 years. He runs a lot of those. Logan, our director of growth, runs some of those. And so we will build out the messaging strategy up front, understand the business, understand who they're trying to communicate to, and help clarify their messaging. Because we find that when you confuse, you lose. And when we help clarify their messaging to focus on what the customer actually wants and needs, it changes everything. And so we've actually built an entire course around this to help people get it right if maybe they're not ready to do a blueprint. And that's been wildly successful. So back in the day, people would come to me and they'd say, hey, Jay, I want to build a website. And I'd say, great, what do you want to put on it? And they'd go, well, here's our logo and here's our mission statement and here's our product list. Make a website. And we would, and it would be better than what they had. But now they'll come to us and go, Jay, I want to build a website. And I'm like, well, why? I'm like, well, because we need a website. Or ours is old. And I'm like, okay, but why are you changing it? Which seems like the wrong question to ask, but it's the right question to ask. And the answer is always some version of, we want to grow our business, we want to get attention, we want to acquire customers, of course. But I always say, but maybe they were doing the wrong thing first. Or people, even worse, people come to go, well, we need SEO. And I'm like, do you? Because your website kind of sucks. So it's like, I could drive a lot of traffic to your website, but if I drive 10,000 people to your website and only one of them converts and actually buys from you, what's the point? Wouldn't it be better to only have 100 people coming to your website and 10 of them convert? They would be. And so traffic's not always the problem. It's understanding the entire marketing funnel. But we start with that messaging up front, and we found that changes everything about everything. So package-wise, we think about things in 3 stages. We plan things, we produce them, and we promote them. Some people just do the planning with us. They'll build the blueprint out with us, and they'll go do it themselves. That's probably only 10%, maybe 20% of people. Most people will then have us build a website, because I always say everybody needs a great website, everybody needs a great video, or videos in many cases. And then we'll go, okay, we've got a great website, we've got some great videos. How do we get the right eyeballs onto those things so that they can get attention and acquire customers? And that's where all the marketing services come in. So it kind of escalates like that. We sell the one fixed priced blueprint up front. We won't even quote anything else before then, although we do list some of our package pricing on our website as well.
Okay, gotcha. So it sounds like for a lot of your clients, I guess call them full service, call them whatever you want. They start from the ground up with you. You do a messaging messaging sessions with them. You hammer that all out. That in and of itself for a business is wildly important, that few smaller business owners either know or understand or care to know, right?
Exactly.
Like they're so busy working 12 hours a day at their job, not necessarily their business, right? That messaging just kind of goes right over the head, understandably so.
And the other thing too about it, it's really important, is a lot of people, me too, love to make the story of our business about us. And it's not about us. Nobody cares. Nobody cares that I started my business when I was 17 years old. They don't. My mom does, and that's it. The only thing that my customers care about is if I can help them grow. Now, at some point, the fact that I started really young and the fact that I've got decades of experience and the fact that I've helped thousands of businesses generate millions or potentially billions of dollars at this point, that matters because it's authority within the context. But they only care about that if I first evaluate and communicate clearly that I know what they want, I know what problem they have, and I know how to help them overcome that problem. That's why messaging matters so much, not just for us, but for everybody.
Well, and just for the client and company relationship, like when you have everything messaging wise and tactical strategies when that's all out in the open, it's an incredible way to build rapport, not just rapport, but trust and faith with your people, right? That they have this faith and trust in you and your company and your people that they can produce what they're contracting you to
That's
produce. And for small business owners, man, that is just just the most important thing, right? You could be an enterprise agency, work with 50, 100, 200 million, whatever plus businesses. At that point, it becomes kind of numbers, right? But for these smaller businesses, this is people's livelihood. These are companies that have, 2 owners and 20 employees. And if business doesn't go the way the owners need it to go, now they've got 20 people relying on them. And it's a whole different ball game. So I love that you mentioned that it kind of starts at the foundation of getting that messaging put together. So no doubt, so important. So you mentioned AI a little bit earlier. You're a self-declared kind of tech nerd, if you will, right? If to use your words, sort of, I don't know. I don't remember that far behind, but where does AI fit into your business? Where do you feel the state of AI is today? Do you guys use it in business, or is it on the docket? What does it look like?
Yeah, it changes everything about everything. I've never seen anything more moving as fast as this. The AI landscape is, software typically is in 6 to 12 month cycles. So that's why your iPhone gets a new major OS update every year. It'll get minor updates throughout the year, but once a year in the summer, Apple announces a new major update, and sometime around September, October, they'll release it. That's how it works. But what's happening in the AI landscape is like every week, it's like dog years, every week something is new that's significant, that's really consequential. And so it's had a vast effect already on us. A lot of all of our copywriting gets proofed by AI now. It's not writing it from scratch. That's not really true. Sometimes we'll use it to write the first, say, 60 to 70%, and then we'll polish it up from there. We'll use it certainly for ideation to help go, hey, here's 10 ideas we're working on. Tell us which one's the best. Do some deep research and find out why. Where it's moving in the app development landscape is crazy. I mean, the other day I was putting together a project, a podcast, and I was helping upload some episodes to an app called Buzzsprout, great little podcast app. And it only lets you upload one episode at a time, but I had a batch of 20 episodes that needed to be uploaded. And I thought there's got to be a way to bulk upload this, and there's not. But then I went into this tool that allows you to build apps with AI. I said, hey, here's the API for Buzzsprout. Can you create a tool that lets me upload multiple podcasts at once? And it's like, sure. And in less than 30 minutes, I had a completely functioning app that's now published on the web. You can go to bulksprout.com. I don't make any money off or anything. It's just a tool. If you use Buzzsprout, you plug your API code in and you upload this. I wrote zero code and did zero design on that website. That's crazy. The landscape of where all this is going is so consequential, especially in the agency space. Agency land, marketing agencies have typically been a and seat game. And what I mean by that is you cannot scale an agency without adding more people, either significant contract bench or significant people bench. But now what's happening is we're able to scale without adding a lot of people because we can provide, for the first time, we can provide high quality at a reasonable or even lower cost sometimes and fast. So, back in the day, there's the project triangle. It's speed, quality, and price. And they always say you could pick 2. But now with AI, it's arguably letting us pick all 3. And so we're able to produce better, higher quality outcomes for our clients quicker. And the people who do not get on board with this, especially in our industry, will not be in business in 5 years, full stop. They got to learn. They got to learn this stuff. They got to teach their teams. I'm doing constant, regular team trainings internally for our teams. In fact, I'm about to start hosting some workshops here for other businesses. People that want to download. I got a big list of tools that I use. You can grab that at aiwithj.com. So you go to aiwithj.com, plug your email address, and I'll send you a list of all the tools that I use. I'm about to update that list actually shortly here. So maybe by the time this is published, I'll have the new list out. But yeah, it's massively consequential across arguably all business categories, but certainly ours.
Do you use it at all for any sort of service output or management of any, any sort of platform that you use for your clients?
Yeah. So take, for example, the marketing blueprint that we produce. Back in the day, it would take a content director plus a copywriter plus a project manager plus a couple of weeks after we met with the client to complete all of the content. Now we have the person who's running the meeting, plus a project manager, plus AI, and it's done in a couple of days. And it's better quality, and it's faster. And we built a custom tool for us using AI that uses AI to actually produce the blueprint in the format and structure that we want. And so I think that's where a lot of opportunity is moving forward, is even creating custom internal tools for people that historically are just a bunch of spreadsheets in their companies, or there's a bunch of manual things. And it wasn't practical to build a custom tool because it was going to cost 50 to 100 grand and take 6 months to a year and then require 10 grand a month in maintenance. But now what if it could be built for 10 grand and the maintenance is only a couple $100 a month? The world and landscape of what's possible inside companies as a result is massive. So that's how we've used it specifically, just as a starting point for how we operate with clients. And then it's reshaping how we do audits, how we do marketing audits, how we do SEO audits. We can just get a lot more done a lot faster with a lot less people. And so I'm pretty convinced that, we'll be able to double the size of the agency without doubling the people. We can just add a couple more people instead of adding double the people.
I like to say that AI, at least in my business, it helps deepen our impact with clients and reduce our own overhead.
Yeah.
Like that's just a huge win on both sides, right?
100%.
We can keep pricing affordable, we can save on overhead, and we double the impact.
Exactly. And we've got to know how to use the tools and what the tools are. And I like to think that I can keep up with this stuff pretty well because like I said, I'm a nerd. I love this stuff. But man, it's moving so fast. I mean, every day there's something new. In fact, I've been teaching this AI class with, it's a homeschool co-op class that my kids are in. There's about 35 high schoolers in this class from 9th to 10th to 12th grade. And since January, I've been teaching this class. It's wrapping up next week. And I haven't even put a curriculum together, mainly because I had some introductory stuff that was like base knowledge I wanted them to know. But after the first few weeks, every week I basically just went, hey, here's what's new. Let's go play with these things. Let me show you how to use them, and then let's create a practical outcome. And so now, over the last couple of weeks, these kids have been producing projects that are all unique. One person created a comprehensive, like 15-minute audio story with multiple voices, multiple characters, sound effects, all driven by AI. If I played it right now on this podcast, no one would know that it was not a real person on that audiobook. I had somebody else create a short story, like an animated short. It was only a little 90-second clip, but I guarantee you that if that kid wanted to, it was actually one of my sons, he could take that and turn it into a YouTube series, and he used multiple AI tools to put it together, but it looks legit. It's like a cool little story about a kid going through a forest, encountering a dragon, defeating the dragon, the whole thing. Another kid made an actual functioning video game. This kid knows how to do zero design and zero coding, and he built a functioning flight simulator that he demoed in class. Unbelievable. And,
wow.
And so that's the landscape that these kids are facing. And what's super cool in this class, when you got 35 homeschoolers in a class, you got a handful of them in there who are like anti-AI because their parents are anti-AI. By the end of the class, everybody is like, this is amazing. It's going to change everything because we can partner with this. And it doesn't suppress creativity. It unleashes it. All of a sudden, kids in their basements are going to be creating full-length Pixar films out of their imagination. And that is incredible. Like, that's awesome. The people that don't like it are the specialists, or the people that, they're the only ones that could do it before, or they were making millions of dollars at big studios. And now kids are going to be making this stuff. It's going to be great.
Yeah, it's wild. What a way to help satiate children's imagination too.
Oh, yeah.
Add some AI to it and take it to the next level.
Yeah.
That's very cool. That's very cool. Well, yeah, I figured there had to be some pretty awesome ways that you guys were nerding out with AI. And for anyone out there thinking, tell me if you agree or not, Jay, but I think a lot of people, and I've been asked this many times, like, oh, so AI is coming. You're going to be going out of business in the next few years. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
There's going to be people who need to operate this stuff.
Exactly.
And you know who's not going to be able to do that? My clients.
Exactly.
Because they don't have the time, desire, or knowledge. That's why they pay us to do what we do in the first place.
Yes, I always say that the biggest mind shift for people is we have to understand that we are moving from executors to operators. We are conducting the orchestra, not playing the violin. And that's a big difference. But it's not nothing to know how to conduct an orchestra. Like that requires a particular set of skills. If you put me with the right AI tools, I will perform the vast majority of adults anywhere because I spend so much time on it. Like I am an expert at these things as much as you can be because I've spent, I don't even know how many hours, with these different tools and resources. And so as a result of that, people will need people like us to be the operators of these robots, if you will, to help execute the outcomes that they want. They'll just be able to achieve things that they couldn't have otherwise achieved. I think about it like this. About 5 or 6 years ago in my agency, I made the decision to start to move production people to contract roles. So think designers, copywriters, developers, all that kind of stuff. I had some internally, and I just said over time, as these people, I'm not going to just wholesale fire people, but over time as they transition, I'm going to make them contractors and we're not going to rehire them. My internal team at the agency are going to be leaders, managers, and strategists. Now I made this decision because I was acutely aware of the globalization of talent. And so what I mean by that is, if I can hire a designer in Costa Rica for $15 an hour, and that is a great wage for them, or I can pay one $75 an hour in America, which one do I choose? And the answer is Costa Rica, because that's a person who still needs a job like anybody else. And I was convinced that's what's going to happen. It is what has happened in many areas. But that did not factor in the reality of AI. Now, AI has taken that to a whole nother level. So I'm very happy with that decision that we made back then, because my internal team here at the agency are not high-end specialist producers. They are leaders, managers, and strategists. They're perfectly equipped to be the orchestra conductors, not the players of the violin. And so that's the future in the marketing business, and where I'm encouraging everybody. In fact, I just did a talk at Agency Builders Retreat, which is an agency community that I get to help lead. And it blew people's mind. At the end, I had buddies texting me going, "Hey, look at this thing that I built in X amount of time. This would have taken us a month before." And I'm like, "I know, bro. I texted this to you like 6 months ago." And he's like, "I know, but I didn't really read it." And I'm like, "I know you didn't, but there's something about being in an event." That's why I love running this retreat. There's something about being in an event. People sit as a captive audience. They start to test stuff themselves and they go, "Oh, this really does work. I should go figure out how to implement this in my business for myself and for my clients."
Very cool. And you kind of just opened my mind to the fact of, it sounds like at present, your agency model is essentially the leadership team is your internal, your employees, your W-2s, and the fulfillment are managed by your internal team, but they are contractors.
Yeah. Our internal team is structured like the type of roles that we have internally. I'm a CEO. Chris is the president. We got a director of web projects, director of development, who also leads hosting and maintenance. We got a marketing teams. Marketing teams are split up into multiple roles. They're basically teamed up into pairs of twos, account managers and project managers. The account manager is responsible for the client relationship. The project manager is responsible for getting things done, tasking out to contractors, time, budget, all those kind of things. And then the team split a technical manager. That person is somebody who basically helps set up Google Analytics, set up Google My Business, set up HubSpot, go high level, all those things. So kind of the technical implementer. And they're using a lot of AI now to help assist with all of those things. And so now instead of having to have one technical manager for every team, I can just have one technical manager who supports 2 or 3 marketing teams and kind of roll like that, where historically that would not have been possible.
Right. Okay. I like that. That's because you'll hear some rumors of, the agency model, you can't scale it or it doesn't work. But it sounds like a perfect hybrid where the leadership team is in-house and the production is managed by the leadership team, and they are technically out of house. They're contracted. Yeah.
And you still need project managers and account managers as the agency grows, because you've got to have enough people to actually have those face-to-face relationship with clients. Another thing that we're about to launch now is called the Business Builders Community. And so I'm convinced that in the marketing space, the moat, if you will, of the business is relationship. And so relationship is built through community. And so we already have an awesome community with agency builders, which is a group of all agency leaders. But now I'm going to build a second community called business builders. I'm giving away my secret sauce here. I'm going to build a second community called business builders. And it's going to be all of our clients, potential prospects, or even other small businesses that maybe couldn't afford us historically, but we can still give them tools, resources, advice inside of this community tool. And then maybe when they are at a level where they can afford or they need to have a bigger agency to come alongside them and help execute these things, we can do that too. And so I think that the world will diverge in 2 direct areas. One will be highly automated, AI driven. The other will be a hyper desire for connection and connectivity. I always remind people, and everybody's not religious, but if you think about the beginning of the Bible, it talks about God making things. And it says he created this and he created that. He created the earth, created light, created this. And then the first time he said it wasn't good was he created man. And he said, it's not good for man to be alone. And I think we all learned that during COVID. And people put that in the context of marriage, but I think it's more than that. It's community. We know as people that we don't do well alone. We need other people around us. We need people shoulder to shoulder. We need somebody to look up to, somebody to stand beside us, somebody who's looking up to us, and somebody that believes in us when we don't believe in ourselves. And if we don't have those people, it doesn't matter how much AI we have, we're going to be miserable. And so I believe deep community relationships and amazing AI automation tools to do things that only let the robots do what robots can do, let people do what only people can do.
Wow, man. Well, this might be the perfect place to put a bow on this. I could keep going. You and I could probably nerd out on this for a long time,
sure.
But I know you're a busy man and you got lots going on. So I want to make sure we honor your time here. Thank you so much for sharing all your time and knowledge. Even just selfishly for me, I've learned a ton from you just in this last hour. So thank you again. And I want to make sure that everybody can catch you where you are or reach out to you if they have questions. Let us know exactly everywhere you are and how to get a hold of you.
Yeah, you can find me on any of the socials that you're on, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. Just search for J. Owen, you'll find me. But if you want a free AI resource to download kind of the list of tools that I offer, and I'm going to be doing some free webinars. We're also going to do some more extensive boot camps down here in Florida to help people learn how to equip AI for themselves and for their business to be more effective and to grow and scale. You can go to aiwithjay.com, aiwithjay.com, and you can get that free resource.
Awesome. And don't forget to check out your podcast. It's Building a Business That Lasts, right?
That's right. Thanks for having me.
All right. Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much, Jay. Really appreciate you, man.
Appreciate it.